so that those who are unable to attend can view it at a later time. So please make sure that you're muted, and unless you're sharing out, which we will definitely encourage. And also please make sure that you are signed into the webinar chat channel on Slack. So if you need to type something there or anything that we share, you can see it in that channel. So we will get started then. As I said, please, so basically I already covered these. But this is really, these best practices kind of came from the idea that, you know, people kind of want to continue some of the conversations that happened at Summer Summit, and we just kind of hope to encourage actual dialogue and conversation. We are not the experts in a lot of this. You all are, since you're out in the classrooms and in the field interacting with students and youth. So we'd love to have your feedback and your ideas about these different areas. We just kind of put some ideas out there based on our experiences. So please share what does and does not work for you, or different ideas that you have throughout this time that we have together.
Yeah, and just to repeat what Kara said earlier, we're not able to view the chat function on GoToMeeting, so please make sure that you're logged into the webinar channel. It's titled Webinar Chat. So just make sure you go ahead and log in on there.
Okay, so just to reiterate our mission and vision. Our vision is that every young adult is educated, employed, and career-bound, and our mission, of course, is to equip young adults with the skills to overcome barriers and win in education, employment, and as citizens. So we sent this out in the email a little bit ago. We'd like to get started with just an icebreaker, and would love to hear from some of you. Please either type this into Slack, or if you would like to speak, we'd like to hear that. If you could all just share what is the most challenging part of teaching resume writing, or if you are new and you have not yet actually taught resume writing to your students, what do you foresee as the most challenging part? So yeah, so if you could just share. I see some people are typing in Slack, which is super helpful, but we'd love to hear at least one thing from everyone, even if you haven't actually taught it yet, maybe what you think would be the biggest challenge is. What Val said in Slack, getting them to take it seriously and do the revisions. That's an interesting one. There's a couple more ideas coming through. Stephen Weaver from Kalamazoo area said learning to put their skills into their own words and not relying totally on me to come up with it all. Jen said explaining to them that a resume doesn't just reflect paid work experience. Interesting.
Jen, can you elaborate on that one a little bit? Are you saying that that getting them to understand that a resume can have more on it than just your past jobs? Is that?
Yeah, that's what I would
say. But if I'm wrong, let me know.
Okay, Tracy said learning to put skills into words, especially offenders that have never worked a job above the table. Interesting. And Darren's one of our new specialists from the UP. He said teaching them resume maintenance. Currently, they have few experiences to enter on a resume, so this sounds like kind of a common thread as they gain experiences, what to highlight on a resume and how to highlight it. So we're definitely covering some of those topics. Yep, so common thread that, you know, the youth that you're working with generally don't have many or any official paid positions. So what should they be putting on these resumes? That sounds like really the common challenge here. But that's definitely something that we'll touch on a little bit. I'll wait a few more minutes for a couple more ideas. Okay, great. Taha says that they cannot figure out what the marketplace wants and their resume is not leading to interviews and they're not sure why. And Erin Sue, great suggestion. You found it easier to work one-on-one as opposed to a group. All right, thanks everyone. So we're definitely going to come back and hit on some of these challenges as we continue throughout the webinar. Please continue to type your suggestions and ideas in Slack. We definitely encourage these conversations. Love to hear challenges that you're working with. They don't know how to explain their accomplishments. Another challenge that I'm sure, and I know that one of the biggest challenges I'm sure you all are facing is just the probably the skill level in terms of reading for our out-of-school students can be a big one, and so that's often something that I'm sure you're working with as well. So for the first part of this, I'm coming at you from my former teacher brain, so bear with me for a little bit, and if I'm repeating something that I'm sure most of you who have teaching certifications, I'm sure that you've heard about this before, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I think that maybe we can start, I guess some of the tips that I would have for helping to get students to achieve, higher quality resumes. So if you want to go ahead. So basically, and I know that if you're working with out-of-school youth, this is not necessarily going to be the most realistic way of working with them. But I do think that for our in-school specialists, something that I would suggest is not really viewing it as, the very first day and the goal and even if you do have the opportunity as out-of-school specialists from the very first day, the goal should not necessarily be here, write a resume. The goal should kind of be to use the idea of Bloom's taxonomy, which is moving up different skill levels to eventually be creating that resume. So something that I kind of want to hear from you all, if you want to go to the next slide, is, we start with these very low level concepts. So if we have students that are really struggling with how do I, write a resume, they aren't understanding the idea that a resume is not just paid work experience, or it's not just jobs, or students who are struggling with how to actually put their experience into words. Then the very first thing we should maybe be teaching them is what a resume is, defining it, describing the purpose of it, and actually seeing maybe someone else's great resume, being able to identify parts of it, being able to listen, describe the components of it. And then as we move up, we're slowly starting to get them to the place where they could eventually create their own. So the next stage of Bloom after remember would be the level of understanding, so their ability to explain ideas or concepts to either you or to their peers and so on. So in this case, the students would maybe do something like they can explain and describe the do's and don'ts of resume writing. So something I thought is you give them a bunch of different cutout pieces that say of different things that you do and don't on resumes, and they have to sort them and work in groups to do that. Or if you're working with them one-on-one in an out-of-school setting, you could give them like a list and they actually read through it, or you read it to them and they say, these are good things in a resume and these are things that you necessarily, or that you don't necessarily want to do. So kind of helping to build these skills on top of each other. Does anyone have any other suggestions for kind of like these lower level, before you actually have a student write a resume, some of these lower level activities that you might start with a student to kind of introduce them to the resume concept before they're actually writing it, writing their own? What do you have them work on? Okay, Candace, one of our brand new specialists, Beth, do you want to share?
Yeah, first of all, I'm super excited for everyone to get to meet Candace. She was just here for some training last week, and we had a great time. I'm really looking forward to seeing all the success that she's going to bring to Orchard Center High School. It's an alternative high school in the Monroe area. So thanks for joining our webinar, Candace. She shared that she breaks down the resume into different components, has a template that she writes out on the whiteboard, and then has the students fill it in with peer support.
Great. So when you're saying that they have them filled in with peer support, they're essentially just kind of filling in, are they filling it in with filling in a template of their own experience, or are they filling it in just with, like, are you giving them like a general person that they would, kind of like a sample, I guess would be my question there, Candace. Because I know that is something that people do, is they maybe start with like so that's a great suggestion, is maybe start with like a pretend person and have them create a sample resume, and that's a good way to get students to kind of understand how to write a resume with someone who has experiences. And I would suggest, instead of even starting with someone like an adult that has all of this employability skills, maybe start with someone who is a high school student, who does just have some volunteer experience, community service, some limited actual work experience that they can put on it, similar to what your students will actually be creating. Tracy says that they talk about which resume template would best suit their lifestyle, functional versus chronological, based on gaps in employment and non-gaps in employment, or if they've ever been employed at all. So that's a great way to start as well. And I'm sure a lot of our out-of-school specialists can relate to that, because you're probably getting youth who have a similar challenge, that they probably have gaps in employment from incarceration or whatever the challenges that those youth are facing.
Hi, this is Carolyn.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hello. Hi. I'm driving. Sorry.
No worries.
The one thing that I've noticed, because I have to get my resumes done for all my students, and I have a class of like 25 kids, so that's been fun. I'm giving them they have to send me the resume, and then we work on it together, like once they start it. But one thing I'm finding out that I have to do next week is I'm going to have to do a computer, like a Word refresher with them, because most of them don't know how to use, I'm truthful, seniors in high school, they don't know how to use tabs, they don't know how to use bullets, they don't know how to use spell check, they don't know how to use a lot of functions that we're used to using all the time. And it's this whole resume process, I have to get it done with them by a certain time, but I'm finding that I have to stop for a minute and make sure they understand how to do this so they can really do a good job on the resumes. I don't know, I just thought that was something to mention that people might need to be aware of.
Well, I know that I'm sure our out-of-school specialists see that all the time, working in Michigan Works offices. I know that even the adults coming in struggle with the computer skills.
Yeah, and there was just a great suggestion from Erin Sue to have, if it works for you, to have your Michigan Works office actually help with the resume portion. So either having someone come into your class and present, or taking your students on a field trip to the Michigan Works Service Center. Many of them have a resume writing workshop. So I used to lead the resume writing workshop in the Connected Service Center, and a lot of our local JMG programs, at least, okay, back then, so it was only Benton Harbor, but maybe not a lot, just one of them, one of the programs, Corey would bring his students and I would do the workshop for them as a Michigan Works employee. So I would do that and then help them with revisions and talk through the computer aspect of it. So that's a great suggestion from Erin too. And maybe even if for some reason Michigan Works isn't available to do it, sometimes the local libraries as well have someone who would be interested in coming and talking to your class about that.
Another really great suggestion here from Darren. He said he has his students develop an understanding of the skills that they build in completing tasks. For example, having a group discussion in your class in order to come to a consensus. What are the skills used to participate in such activities? So like if you do an activity with them, then they can brainstorm if they use teamwork, compromise, listening skills, and speaking skills, etc. I think that's a really great suggestion. Then the students can start to see what skills they can list on their resume for the different tasks that they completed in class. And later, Beth is going to talk a little bit about kind of specifically what, the advantage that your students being in JMG will gain from all of the different activities they'll complete that they can add to their resume just from the JMG activities that they'll do. So just a couple more ideas for scaffolding up through Bloom's. One of them, as you keep moving up, they could, so essentially students can teach each other what should be included and not included on a resume, identify what's missing from resumes, maybe if information is out of order, and then eventually it would be great to actually have students critiquing or revising, scoring resumes. If you give them an actual rubric they could use to do that, and then so that's a way to for them to look at a resume, see what they think is good and what isn't good before they're actually creating their own. I'm sure that many of you have thought of that and have done something similar to that before, or maybe you have students actually revising each other's created resumes, which is obviously a great idea. And then another so at the evaluate level, which is higher up as well, something you could have students do is they could be like a boss at a company, and they're given different resume options, and they're asked to determine who they would hire for a specific position and argue why. So just some different project ideas for those of you who have the opportunity to see students regularly or in class, and you can work with them in that way. Any other ideas for things that you do with your students to build them up? We love to hear those. One from Taha, he says that he tells his students, today writing a resume is more like a sales promotion. You don't want to lie, but you want to, pump up your skills and accomplishments. That's a great suggestion. You're not necessarily listing every single thing you've ever done on there, which is, on our end, I can definitely say that as someone who's had to read a lot of resumes lately, that is definitely the case. I do not like to read 25 different bulleted lists. I would prefer to, it is very true that within the first 15 seconds of reading a resume, I've made a decision about someone. Maybe not necessarily the case for the types of jobs our students are applying for, but it is a true statement for other positions.
Yeah, so on this slide, it has an activity idea that Kara obviously just went over, but it's something that I think would be really interactive and fun for students. Just to restate it, that one student is a boss of the company, and then the others submit resumes, and they choose which one would be best. What other kind of ideas or activities have you done in your classroom, or maybe you haven't tried it, but it's an idea you've seen? I'd love to hear what other types of activities you know of that have to do with critiquing or grading resumes. Oh, well, maybe that's something we should do some research on and get you some ideas if no one has any ideas to share. But as Carolyn was stating, when you have a large class of students, that's an awful lot of resumes to be critiquing on your own. So anytime you can get the students involved in doing peer reviews, that can really help gauge your efforts in helping them all to have an excellent resume.
Or I do also wonder if any of you have a rubric that you use to help guide your students in their creation of them. So whether that's like a grading rubric for those of you who are in school and giving students a grade, or just a rubric for if you're out of school and have people that kind of need a little bit of a guidance for how they're creating it. Like, you know, a template is great for actually creating it, but a rubric can give a little bit more detail in terms of reflecting on, is this what people are looking for, and kind of the challenge of, is this what an employer is actually looking for in a resume. I definitely think rubrics are a great way for students to see what is kind of needed there. So then the last level, obviously, of Bloom's taxonomy is the creation level. So at this point, students should really have a great understanding of what is a great resume, what's a not so great resume. They should have seen a lot of examples of both. They should be able to look at it before they're even writing their own resumes. They should be able to look at a resume and say, that's not a good resume, that is a good resume, this is why. And then they're working on creating their own. And so then I also think that they can revise and edit each other's resumes. They can give feedback to each other if you're working, you know, in a large group of students. This is a really, I think, great way to engage students in that kind of like leadership capacity as well. So any suggestions on anything that you do when you're actually having your students create their own resumes that has been successful, or something that you found that that works really well in that area? So,
okay, so Candace has shared that through Google you can find great examples of bad resumes, which she is planning to use. So it sounds like probably printing those off and then having students critique them together. Or another way you could do that is if you have access to a projector in your classroom, or even like the old school overhead transparencies, depending on what type of technology you have. But one idea would be to print them either on the transparency, or go ahead and do it on your smartboard or whatever you have. And do one all together as a class and kind of talk through what's not so great and why. Okay, so we have a couple more people typing suggestions, so I'm gonna hold off and wait on those before we move on. Okay, so Darren shared his students struggle with giving meaningful compliments and constructive criticism. Interesting. Okay, so you've had to start split roles and have, okay, so he splits up his students. So if you have a sample resume, one group of students can only give compliments about the resume, and then another group can only give criticism. about their resume. So that's a great idea for getting students to look at. You know, sometimes they might just be quick to point out everything they see wrong with someone's resume, but to really use it as an opportunity to build each other up as well when they see something positive. So great suggestion there. Valerie from Hartford High School shared that she does scaffolding and worksheets before creating the actual resume. Okay, so you hand out sheets on verbs that are effective, as well as using the resume cover letters and resumes.com that has descriptions for different jobs, which helps students, students who are struggling to explain the skills performed at work. Has good examples and is searchable. So yeah, I'm sure you all know, but there are so many different websites you can use for as resume builders, or you can search in a job title and it'll help give you bullets that might fall underneath certain categories. I would love to see you all share on that channel just any website resources that you use with your students. I'm going to go through a couple more slides here, and then we're going to circle back to the questions or challenges that you all brought up at the beginning of the webinar. So as I go on, Kara has stepped out. She had to leave, so you're stuck with me the rest of the webinar. But I'll go ahead through the rest of my slides, and then if you just want to populate that webinar chat channel with any resources that you use, websites or links for resume builders, that would be great. All right, so kind of shifting away from talking about Bloom's taxonomy, I want to share, well, it seems obvious to me, a great culminating activity for resume building, and that is, of course, the Employability Skills event at the CDC. So if you are a new specialist and you've never been to the Career Development Conference before, one of the events students can participate in is the Employability Skills event, at which they have to present a resume to a guest judge who serves as to both judge and critique their resume as well as to interview the students. And this is one area that we've received a lot of feedback from judges that every now and then they come across a great resume, but overall they haven't been blown away by the resumes that our students have been presenting at the CDC. So I was really interested that so many specialists wanted to learn more about resumes, because obviously it's a really important part of obtaining employment for our youth. So just a couple things to keep in mind if you have students who will be bringing their resume to the Career Development Conference. They don't just need to write a resume, they need to know how to present their resume in an interview. So I'm not just talking about how to hand it to someone. Obviously, they can walk in and hand, a folder or a resume over to the person. But knowing how to speak to their resume and how to reference things off their resume, hopefully when students are in an interview and they have their resume with them, hopefully the interviewee or the interviewer will be asking them questions prompted by the resume. And then also working with students to know how to draw attention to highlights on their resume during an interview without coming off as self-centered. So that's something that it kind of carries over into interviewing skills, but feeding off of that resume and making sure, like some of you have already mentioned on Slack here, students don't always know how to really list their outstanding skills. But by doing that, it gives them more talking points and things they can feed off of during an interview. So a couple other hints and tips that I'd love for you all to chime in here, but I was just brainstorming the experiences that Jobs for Michigan's graduate programming provides to your students that can serve as great resume boosters. So just the things that came to my mind right away. Obviously, if one of your students is a career association officer, that should automatically go on their resume. That's something outstanding they can put on there, along with volunteer experiences, of course, any community service you've done as a program. And then anything they've done that could fall under a program advocate would be an excellent thing they could put onto their resume. So if you have a student who's attended Leadership Day or Legislative Day and they've had the opportunity to interact with their legislators and to speak with them about JMG, that could go on as a skill or an experience they've had as a program advocate, as well as if they have been featured on a success story, that they and their story have served as advocates to the JMG program, and that's something that could certainly be highlighted. Of course, any awards from the Career Development Conference. And what else? Can anyone help me come up with any other ideas of things that students are exposed to as a result of JMG that could be added to their resume? Okay, well, that is something that I will continue to brainstorm, and as we post more resources for resume writing, anything else outside or anything else that's as a result of JMG that you can help them to put on their resume, I will definitely send those out to you. Valerie, once again from Hartford, said we encourage students to put on work that they have done that's not for an employer. So she has a lot of students who have babysat or done lawn mowing or assisted elderly neighbors. So encouraging them to include that on their resume as well. So I'm just curious, Val, when you have a student who's done something, for example, assisted an elderly neighbor, would you, I guess there's no right or wrong answer, obviously, I'm just curious, do you have them list that as a employment experience, or do you have them just list it as a skill, or just as under somewhere other than employment experience?
It depends on what the student has done, like if they just once in a while volunteer, but I have some students who actually like are almost employed to go over and help like a neighbor where they're actually, so then I usually have it actually under employment, especially if they don't have any. It's kind of where I fill in the gap.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back to those issues or challenges that everyone brought up at the beginning of our webinar today, and just going to go through any hints or tips that I have related to them. And then, of course, please chime in with any feedback you have or ideas that you have related to other issues or concerns about resume writing. So going back to the very first one was Val, her main concern is having the students take their resume writing seriously and to actually do the revisions. So beyond just hounding them and reminding them that it's an important part of getting a job, does anyone have suggestions on things you do to help students to take their resume writing seriously and to actually take the time to make the revisions? Now, I would think that it would come, they would take it a little more seriously when they're actually applying for a job rather than just doing it as an assignment. So I would encourage you, of course, anytime you know a student's applying for a job, say, oh, hey, you know, that resume we wrote way back when at the beginning of school, let's get that out and look over it again. Because when it's actually time to present it to an employer, they may take it a little more seriously. But if anyone else has hints or tips related to that, how to get your youth to take it seriously, please feel free to share. Okay, and then Stevens was students learning to put their skills into their own words and not relying on him to come up with all the answers. So when I did a resume writing workshop, we had a worksheet that listed all sorts of skills, and then it had a sentence that matched up with each of the skills. So for example, if they were choosing to say that they are dependable, it would have a sentence that kind of beefed up an explanation of, dependable employee who arrives to work on time and is ready to take on any challenge, or something like that. So I'll see if I can find a copy of that worksheet that I used way back when I was working in the service center doing resume workshops. And that might, something along those lines might be helpful for your students to just go ahead and you could have them like circle 4 or 5 skills that they think they have, and then look over the sentences to come up with. They may need to, modify the sentence a little bit, but it would at least give them something to go off of. So we'll see if I can find that. But if anyone else has some tips around helping students kind of do their own work when it comes to writing out their skills, please feel free to share. Okay, then Jen was explaining to students that resumes do not just need to be paid work experience. So I would always tell the people in my resume workshops that your resume is a reflection of your skills that happens to list your work experiences, if you have them. So one of the workshops that I led was for our prisoner reentry program. So a majority of those attending the workshop had large gaps in their employment history, and often gaps that they did not want to have to explain. So as Tracy mentioned, in hers was that her question or challenge was helping them learn to put skills into words, especially those who have never worked like an official job. So rather than breaking down from this date to this date I worked at this job, I would help them go through and say, from this date to this date, this was the main skill that I exhibited. And then underneath that, they would list, if they had a job during that time, then they would list it there, or just any experiences that fell within that time frame. Okay, let's see, so during this challenge was teaching them resume maintenance. So one idea would be to have like a scheduled resume check-in throughout the year. So if you have, I know many programs do their resume writing right at the beginning of the program year to kind of get everyone kicked off and hopefully employed early on in the year. But one idea would be then to have regular check-ins, maybe like 2 other times throughout the year, where everyone updates their resume. I know it's kind of like in an ideal world, you can have time set aside for this. But I know your schedules can be hectic, of course. But if there was any way for it to work out, and then whatever things you've done in JMG up until, from one check-in to the next, you can have everyone go ahead and update those things. That would be one way to kind of work it into your schedule to have a resume update throughout the year. All right, sorry, I'm jumping back and forth here, then rolling through messages. Okay, so Karen Mazur's concern was transferable skills for those who have had little or no job experience. So once again, that comes back to that resume, rather than just listing, from this date to this date, I held this job. Here are my main skills, and these are the dates in which, I practiced this skill at a place of employment or whatever other place. So that's where it's really important to look at the different types of resumes and see maybe a chronological resume is just really not ideal for your students because they don't have a long work history, if at all. So definitely something to keep in mind there. Okay, so Taha said to not figure out what the workplace wants, resumes not leading to interviews and they don't know why. So I think one of the big issues here is that students aren't necessarily tailoring their resume to specific jobs. or they don't understand, they write one resume and they send the same resume off to 30 jobs. And they don't understand why that's not working. It's, of course, once again, in an ideal world, they would have a tailored resume for each job they apply to. So figuring out if they're not going to have time to modify it, or they're simply not going to do it, to modify it for each job that they're applying for, how can you help them write a resume that accurately reflects their skills without being a turnoff to some employers? So, for example, once again, leading back to my resume workshop days, many times they would put for their objective, get a job. And yes, that's one way to keep it broad, and you're not eliminating any positions by doing that, but you come off as desperate. So obviously that's something that you all know, but really working with your students to help them understand that even just popping into your Word document or your Google Doc where you have this saved and updating that to make it obvious that you're intentionally applying for a job and not just throwing your resume out to any open position can make a big difference. Okay, so Taha also said students don't always know how to explain their accomplishments. So something that I found to be helpful is rather than giving a student a template and saying, here, fill this in, having them start with a conversation. So if you're in an out-of-school program, this might work much more easily for you to sit down and talk one-on-one with your students. And just have questions to prompt them, to get them thinking about their skills and accomplishments outside of employment. But if you're in an in-school setting, this could be something that you have students do in pairs, to have them pair together and tell each other about all their life successes. And of course, you're going to have those students who say, oh, well, I don't have any. So then you have to, kind of pull it out of them with some prompts. But getting them to talk about, oh, well, I have, this relationship with my neighbor and they had me walk the dog or something like that. And okay, well, what skills did your neighbor see in you that prompted them to think you would be a reasonable person to have walked their dog? So, oh, well, they saw I was responsible and they see that I'm, whatever other skills that are observable to those around them that might look appealing to someone who wants to hire you. So there's just one idea of how to get them talking about their skills outside of just their basic list of jobs. And then, of course, I think I'm still scrolling through the questions here from the beginning. Tracy mentioned about different types of resumes. So I think especially for out of school, that's going to be really important. I know it's easier to just pop them a template and say, here, fill this in, but we're here to get to the jobs and to market themselves the best way possible. And plugging answers into a chronological resume, although it might be the easiest way, is not always going to be the most effective way to helping our students have having excellent resumes for obtaining employment. And it's not giving them the foundation they may need to have the skills so that when they do go on and finish whatever type of education they do after high school, if any, that they know how to do a more substantial resume once they're looking for those more career-level jobs. So, yes, it is, of course, important to talk about the different types of resumes and when one might be appropriate over another. Okay, so I think that scrolled through all of the challenges you were having. Just scrolling back to the bottom of Slack here, I see that Valerie shared the template that she uses in her classroom. So thanks, Val. I hope everyone is able to hop onto Slack and pull that template, and you may find it useful for you and your students. If anyone else has any other resources they want to share, of course, feel free to go ahead and do so on that webinar chat channel on Slack. All right, to kind of bring it all back here, I'm going to do a little reality shot and remind everyone, kind of bringing it back to JMG here. and it wouldn't be a complete JMG webinar if I didn't mention ENDMS. So of course, when you're teaching resume writing, don't forget to enter your model service. Both in school and out of school have competencies directly related to resume writing. And then of course there's the competency attainment levels. So just make sure as we're striving to help our students achieve competency in all to attain excellence in the various competencies, and that we're shooting to that level 3 attainment. Just make sure as you're logging any type of model services that have to do with resume writing that you're tracking level 1 for when you're introducing it, level 2 for when they are practicing it, and then level 3 for once they have attained that competency or mastery of resume writing. So I would think having a completed resume would constitute attainment of a level 3. So just make sure you keep that in mind and that you're not forgetting to log that and give credit where credit's due for the various competencies that your youth are attaining. So that is the end of the content I have to deliver to you today. If anyone else has other feedback or suggestions, I'll pause for a bit and give you an opportunity to speak up or to go ahead and type into Slack any other resources you would like to share or ideas that you have, or any questions you want to pose to get feedback from anyone else. So I will shut up for a couple minutes and leave it open for you. All right, well, thank you to everyone for calling in today. We've had some great conversation going on Slack and through the call. I really appreciate everyone's feedback and the information. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel for you to review at your pleasure or to share with any other team members who may have been unable to make today's call. If you have resources, feel free to share them on the JMG Specialist channel would probably be the best place. And then, if it's specific to one model or another, you can always put it into the specific models channel. But I love seeing you share resources on Slack and using that platform as a way to interact with the specialists across the state. There's so much of the work you do that, it's not, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, and you have a state full of specialists who have experience or ideas about the very problems or issues you may be having. So please use that platform as a way to interact with the other specialists. So I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks for your time today and enjoy the rest of the day.